Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive.
Let's do it.
All right. Today we're tackling a story that probably feels pretty familiar, at least on the surface.
Yeah.
Noah's Ark, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going way back to the beginning of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 13.
Okay.
And we've got some excerpts here from a sermon about this passage.
All right.
Now, you might think you know this story backwards and forwards,
Yeah.
but trust me,
Okay.
there's a lot more going on here than just, building a big boat and gathering up the animals.
That is true.
And honestly, I think some of the stuff that we're going to uncover today is going to really surprise you.
Okay.
Like, we're going to see God in a whole new light. For one thing, like talking about emotions, like regret and sorrow.
Interesting.
And then there's Noah.
Yeah.
He was called righteous, but what does that actually mean? What
Right.
did that look like back then?
Yeah.
And we're also going to try to bring it all home, connect it to our lives today, because believe it or not, there are actually a lot of parallels between Noah's world and the challenges we face.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So buckle up, folks. We're going deep.
All right.
So let's start with the state of the world back then.
Okay.
I mean, if you think things are bad now,
Mm-hmm.
Genesis paints this really bleak picture of humanity before the flood.
Mm-hmm.
It actually says that every inclination of their hearts was only evil all the time.
Yeah. And that phrase, it really hits you, doesn't it?
It does. It's heavy.
Really evil all the time.
Not just, making a few bad choices here and there, right?
Right.
This was like a constant state of wickedness.
Yeah.
Like a default setting.
Exactly. And the sermon, it goes even deeper into it. It
Yeah.
talks about how the world was just drowning in violence and immorality and corruption. It's almost like the spiritual flood,
Oh,
right?
so that virtual flood.
Yeah, like it already consumed everything.
Wow, that's a powerful image. And it makes you think, like, how bad did it actually have to get for God to be like, all right, that's it. I'm hitting the reset button.
Yeah, it's a big question.
It's a huge question.
Mm.
I mean, what must it have been like for God to witness that level of evil?
I know, right? And that leads us to this really interesting part in Genesis.
Okay.
It says that God regretted creating humans and felt deep sorrow. Deep sorrow.
Mm.
You know, we don't often think about God experiencing those kinds of emotions.
Yeah, I have to admit, that's not the picture of God I always had in my head. Like, growing up, it was always like, God is this all-powerful, all-knowing, kind of unshakable being.
Right.
So to hear that God could feel regret, like real regret, it kind of changes things, makes him seem, I don't know, maybe more relatable, more human.
Well, he did create us in his image, right?
That's true.
But I think it's really important to point out that this isn't just disappointment we're talking about. This is grief. This is heartache.
Yeah, you're right. It's profound sorrow. Like, imagine your own child doing something that just breaks your heart.
Exactly.
That's the kind of feeling we're talking about here.
Yeah. And I think theologically, this passage opens up so many questions, right?
Yeah.
Like, if God knew everything that was going to happen, did he miscalculate somehow with humanity?
Right.
Or is this more about the delicate balance between our free will and God's plan for us?
Mm.
There's a lot to unpack there.
There is. But regardless, I think what really stands out here is that this is a God who is deeply invested in his creation,
Absolutely.
who feels things, real emotions.
Yes, and even though he's heartbroken over what humanity has become, he's still a God of justice.
Right. There has to be some kind of accountability for this level of evil. Right.
Exactly. And that's where the flood comes in. It's this necessary act of judgment, like cleansing the earth.
Okay. Yeah. It's like starting over with a clean slate.
Exactly. But even within that judgment, there's this beautiful thread of mercy running through it.
Oh, how so?
Well, God doesn't just wipe everything out completely. There's a plan for preservation.
Right. Which brings us to Noah. He's described in Genesis as this righteous man, blameless among the people of his time.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to say, there's got to be more to it than just, being a decent guy when everyone else is going off the rails.
Oh, for sure.
What really set Noah apart, in God's eyes?
Well, the key here is that phrase, walked faithfully with God. That's what the sermon really dives into. It wasn't just about avoiding evil. It was about actively choosing to live differently, choosing to align himself with God's will.
So it's not just passive goodness, like, oh, I just happen to be a nice person.
Right.
It's more like, I'm choosing to walk in this specific direction, even when everybody else is going the other way.
That's such a good way to put it. It's an intentional walk.
Intentional, exactly.
And honestly, that's a really powerful lesson for all of us today.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, look, we might not be facing a literal flood,
Right.
but we all have our own floods to deal with.
Oh, absolutely. Like, our own personal struggles, temptations, the pressure to compromise our values, those can feel like overwhelming floods sometimes.
Exactly. The negativity, just the constant bombardment of stuff we're dealing with every day.
It's a lot, for
It
sure.
is.
So I think what you're saying is it's about building our own arcs, right?
Yeah.
Like figuring out what principles, what values, what beliefs are going to help us weather those personal storms.
Yes. And just like Noah wasn't alone in the ark, we don't have to face our challenges alone either.
That's so true.
We have our faith, we have our communities, we have our families, our friends.
The court systems, yeah.
Right. All of these things are there to help us navigate the tough times.
It's like we've got our own life rafts and our own life jackets, too.
Oh, Clee.
Wow, so much to think about here. I mean, we've uncovered a God who feels deeply. We've talked about a world spiraling into darkness, and we've seen a man who chose a different path.
Yeah.
But here's the question I want to leave you with today.
Okay.
What does your personal arc look like? What choices are you making every single day to walk faithfully with God, to weather those inevitable storms in your life? Because just like Noah, you don't have to go it alone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everybody. See you next time.
See ya.